Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, we're going to give you the almost complete guide to training splits. We're going to have a two-part series. We're going to talk about push-pull legs, upper lower full body, and pro body part splits. This is part one. Part two will be over on Faz's channel. You can head over there now to check out part two, and I will have it linked below. So before we get into things, Faz, can you tell everybody who you are and why you're on my channel?
All right. Hey, folks. I am Faz from Faz Lifts. Me and Steve go way back. I am on the channel to give you some information about training splits today. I would love if you guys come over to my channel, go check it out, go subscribe, and see the follow-up part to this about bro splits. So, all right.
All right. So this was Faz's idea. We didn't compare notes. We didn't do bullet points. And quite honestly, if I look like death, my sinuses are killing me. So if I can't breathe, don't hold it against me. So Faz, let's dive in. This is going to be an interesting series. We're going to talk about some different points, pros and cons to each of the majors. Let's start with push-pull legs. I will say that probably of all the different types of training, the push-pull legs, when somebody comes to me for coaching, this is number one as far as the program people are using that come to me, with body part splits being last and full body being second to last, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So, I really was a little bit clueless. Coaching educates you a little bit, but I didn't expect so many people to be involved with the push-pull legs. Have you ever run it yourself?
So yeah, interesting enough, it's always interesting comparing notes with Steve, because Steve's over there in the US, I'm in the UK, hence the accent and the mug of tea. So all the stereotypes. And so, but yeah, there you go. So, but push-pull legs is immensely popular in the UK as well. I think we have the training influence here from Trained by JP. A lot of you guys will know who he is. And so push-pull legs is very popular over here as well. I have run it myself. Generally, what I like to do is run a routine for a couple of years. So 2020 and 2019, I ran push-pull legs. A couple of years prior to that, I ran upper lower. And only now, this year, am I running bro split. Would you believe, Steve, for the first time in my life? I come from a powerlifting and strongman background, so I've actually never run a bro split before. So there we go. So yeah, I have done push-pull legs. Unusual, right? So yeah, so first time I'm doing push-pull legs, and I wanted to kick off the discussion by saying that as long as you're working hard and the volume is matched, it more than likely doesn't make a massive difference from the top-down perspective. What I want to talk about today, at least from my perspective, is what are the individual differences in terms of recovery and where you can apply focus and how things fit into the calendar. So firstly, in terms of recovery from a push-pull legs, I found probably, let's talk about positives first. Like, one of the nice things about the push-pull legs in terms of recovery is you can group together similar body parts in probably the way which provides the least amount of overlap, I would say. Would you agree with that, Steve?
Yeah, I would agree. The only caveat I'd toss in the ring, and we can dive into this, is that I find the push day to be rather clunky because you're trying to fit a lot of parts under the engine.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say in terms of how I would see a push, I would go with, say, chest, shoulders, tries. In terms of back, I would see back, which encompasses quite a large amount of areas. You've got the lats, you've got the traps, upper back area, then also rear delts and biceps. Is that how you see the back as well?
Yeah, pretty much.
So it becomes quite a big day relative to the push day. And then legs is, well, you've got quads, hams, glutes, and calves. So that's a monster day. So push day is a little bit clunky, but also I find it's a lot easier than the pull and the legs. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues, it's not an easy program. Let's put it that way, and you have to be very particular about how you structure it, not just in a general sense, but for your own recovery and et cetera, because you have the tendency, you could be doing deadlifts and squats on back-to-back days. So there's some ways to program this to make it make more sense, but it can be a very demanding program. It has to be programmed correctly. And it really requires the eye of somebody that understands programming balance and the demands of programming. Is that a fair statement, Faz?
100%. So let me give the guys at home and guys and girls listening an example of this. So let's talk about my push days when I was doing push-pull legs to let you guys know how I program things and what Steve's talking about when he says you've got to be particular. So I had 3 separate push rotations. So I would do push-pull legs, push-pull legs, push-pull legs, 3 separate push rotations so I could balance the workload. Now, the first push rotation was leveraged more towards chest volume. The second was leveraged more towards shoulder volume. And the third was leveraged more towards tricep volume. So that way, there was a natural rotation of what got focused and what was allowed to recover a little bit. So to give you a perspective of what I mean by a slight focus, on my chest focus day, I would do 3 exercises for chest, 2 for delts, 2 for triceps. On my shoulder focus day, it would be 3 for delts, 2 for chest, 2 for triceps. You guys get the idea. My triceps, 3 exercises for tricep, 2 for chest, 2 for shoulders. So that way, it provided a natural periodization, sort of going up and down with regards to the workload and the focus you put on certain areas, and then how other areas within the same day were allowed to recover somewhat, at least not be as stressed. So that way, you get a natural rotation over the course of, say, I don't know, 10 to 14 days, however often you're doing the push-pull legs. That was one of the things that I did. Firstly, what do you think about that, Steve? And do you have any other ways?
No, it's pretty similar to what I did. I mean, one of the issues with the push day is that lifters have a tendency to always start with the sexy bench variation, right?
Yeah.
And I really have a mental tick against ignoring big, powerful shoulder, overhead movements. So
yeah.
I always have 2 variations for each, and I'll dive into another point to add to yours. Variation A would start with a bench lift or chest press, and then variation B would start with an overhead press. So there would be some balance and some focus, and over the course of 14 days or a month, everything would balance out rather nicely. I tend to have about 6 exercises rather than 7, but one of my exercises is typically a superset. So we're not too far off in what we do. I do a lot. I like the dips and push-ups superset.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I'm kind of obsessed with in programming currently. But with putting in 2 variations, you put in 3. One of the things it allows us to do, and I'm going to transition here over into the pull in the legs, is during the A rotation, I might have bench, deadlifts, and then leg press. So we're not doing deadlifts and squats. And then in the second rotation, I might have military press, barbell row, dumbbell row, and then on the leg day, I would have squats. So I'm getting a little bit of rotation. I'm getting a little bit of distance between squats and deadlifts.
Yeah, you can see how this starts to become very complicated very quickly. So what I would do when I was putting my routines together is go on an Excel spreadsheet and just write down the push-pull leg rotations, all 3 in columns. So then I could do what Steve's saying and just make sure the big lifts on every push-pull legs threesome rotation are split apart. So I don't want my squat to my deadlift to be in the same push-pull legs rotation. I want them separate. And it's the same with the bench press and the military press, have them separate. So I sort of accomplished that by having certain focuses. So on my push days, as I was saying, one was a push focus with a bench or with 3 chest exercises, and that would normally have the bench. And then if I was focusing on shoulders, that would normally have a press. So I did a similar thing with the lower body. And one would be a quad focus day where I would have the squat. The other would be a posterior focus day where I would have the deadlift, and then there would be a glute focus day where I would have something like a glute bridge. So that's kind of how I made sure that things were split apart. But so I might have worded it differently, but actually we're saying very similar things, just having the recovery aspect. Yeah.
One of the things and I want to add to this, one of the things I sometimes do is on the pull day, on the non-deadlift day, sometimes I lead off with shrugs. Get those, a heavy barbell movement. But it all depends on the structure of the program and the equipment of the individual. There was a point I was going to make, Faz. I was going to ask you, when it comes to push-pull legs, There's many ways to cycle them. You can do 3 on, 1 off. You can, do 5 days a week. How do you, without me getting into how I generally program mine, we'll set the table and how do you generally recommend people structure theirs?
So with hypertrophy work, and I think with the push pull legs, we could definitely say it falls in the hypertrophy kind of camp rather than strength based work. With that, I like to be a bit more free and easy with my rest days, because I like to be a bit more free and easy with my deloads. So with my hypertrophy sessions, because of so much variation, I don't like to set a particular schedule. I'll just say, here are your 9 sessions, 3 times push pull legs. Do them as often as you can. I'll encourage people to go as often as recovery allows. Now, this kind of brings me on to the next point I was going to talk about, which I'll leave for now, which is some of the downsides of push-pull legs. So yeah, that was my general thing. When it comes to strength work, I tend to have much more structured deloads because I happen to think that it's a more stressful form of training. But for hypertrophy, I encourage people to take rest days as and when they can. And so I'm a little bit more free and easy with the full body rest, which is the deload.
Yeah, when it comes to programming, one of the things I've really one of the things I've pushed in the last 5 years is more flex scheduling, and we'll talk about this further in the upper lower. But flex scheduling basically is that you have the flexibility to insert rest days and have them more intuitive or natural. So you got something going on a Saturday, it's your girlfriend's birthday or whatever, you take a day off. So instead of being like, I have to work out 3 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off, or sometimes 3 and 1 off, 6 days a week. Yeah. I prefer that lifters train no more than 5 days a week, take 2 days off, train no more than 3 days in a row, and they have the flexibility of inserting extra rest days or rest days when they make sense for them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think we fall very much in line on that. So I was going to move on to some of what I see are the negatives. And I think the biggest negative for me with the push-pull legs is recovery in the shoulder girdle and the elbows. In particular, that is, for me, I see as the biggest problem. And that's something which is an inevitable downside with this compared to something like an upper lower. It's going to be a problem because you're going to have 2 out of 3 days which are going to hit the shoulder girdle and which are going to hit the elbow region. And if we look at on a leg day, if you are including a deadlift variation, you have a 3rd day which is hitting the shoulder girdle, which if you do a deadlift variation. So potentially you're actually hitting the shoulder girdle 3 times across all 3 days, depending on how you put where you put the exercises. So in terms of, I would say, almost inevitable negatives of the push-pull legs, that's probably one of them. What do you think of that, Steve?
No, I would agree. I ran my first 18 months of training. I basically ran a body part split. I'm a child of the 80s. That was in all the Weider magazines. That's what I did. And then somewhere along the line, I don't know how or when, but I picked up a push-pull legs. And some of the mistakes I made were having only a 3 workout rotation where I was squatting every 4th day, benching every 4th day. And it really beat the living crap out of my lower back and my elbows and my shoulders. I'd never been, in my early years, I'd never been injured more. I would completely agree with you. I would add that one of the pitfalls is trying to turn every push-pull legs into necessarily we have to have the same amount of volume we would we tend not to look at weekly volume on push-pull legs. Yeah. Whereas we would on an upper lower or a full body or a body part split. On a push-pull legs, we try to get all that. We have a tendency to try to get all that weekly volume in one session. And I would consider that one of the negatives, because you just have to be aware of that, and you might have to not try to do 250 sets in one workout.
Yeah, for sure. It ends up being something like every 5 days or so if you want to do a routine with a couple of rest days. Like a very popular version in the UK is to do push-pull, rest, legs, rest, and then have that as a rotation, which is a 5-day rotation. So then what you would do is you would try and map out 5 days, say 4 rotations, which is roughly 20 days, which is kind of the same as 3 weeks. and then map out your volume in that way. So you've got 4 rotations, which is the equivalent of roughly 3 weeks, and match your volume in that kind of way, if you see what I mean. So let's say you were targeting something like 10 sets per body part over the course of 21 days. 10 sets per body part per week would be 30 sets across the 20 days. If you divide that by 4, it would be however many sets, like what is that, 7.5 per rotation. So you've got to really, if you're looking at volume over 5 days, you've got to do the calculations, you've got to do the math, and it's not that easy to do. So I just did it, and it was about 7.5 sets per body part if you want to look for about 10 sets per body part per week. So you've got to, it takes a bit more thought, and not everyone is aware of that or is prepared to do it. So yeah, it takes a bit more thinking, I think.
I made a video about this week, about push-pull legs this week, Faz, and we're still on some of the cons of the programming style. One of the cons is that it is, and this is necessarily a positive, is that it is a very hard way to train, which inherently has the potential to give you really good benefits. But when you're training harder, sometimes people will pull back on the average set intensity or how hard they're actually working per set, and basically snip the testicles off the program.
Yeah. I think if we sort of compare that to an upper lower, for example, where you can perhaps, or maybe like a chest and back day. Let's take a chest and back day. If you do a chest exercise and then a back exercise, you can pretty much do that back exercise without being influenced by the chest. Whereas if you're doing a push routine, every exercise after your first exercise, assuming it's some kind of press, is going to be influenced by that first exercise. So mentally, you might be playing the mental game of pulling back a little bit right from the beginning. Whereas if you're doing a chest back rotation, you can just pound away, pound away, pound away. Whereas a push day, everything's going to have an influence further down the chain. And that might influence you to pull back a little bit, or you might just go all out and not have a particularly great time on your last couple of exercises. So yeah, I mean, it's a great routine. You can progress on it fantastically, but there are definitely some downsides.
Yeah, you just got to make sure that, in my world, at least one set of every exercise is pushed for some sort of progression indicator, even if you feel a little bit worn down. By progression indicator, I mean, there has to be some trigger for progression built into the program. You can't just do it when you feel like it. Each exercise needs to have a progression indicator. When do you move up in weight? And, there has to be at least one set out of every exercise where you are attempting to make progress. Is that fair, Faz?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And I think once you've got it down, you can probably work it out by lowering the volume. If you're getting to the last couple of exercises and you're completely wiped out and you're not able to progress because you've got nothing left in the tank, you know how to pull it back for next time, to maybe reduce the volume a little bit on some of the earlier workouts. I mean, what's popular over in the UK is just to do a couple of top sets, a heavy set, a back off set, and move on. Heavy set, back off set, and move on, keeping the overall session volume quite low, but enough that by the end of the session, you're still able to hit it pretty hard.
Yeah, that's a fair way of training. I was going to make the point that, even in a push-pull legs, I make sure generally when I'm structuring an average workout, it's about 18 sets max per workout, which in some worlds that's low volume, and some worlds with how I ask people to train, that's very, very intense for them. But even on the push-pull legs, I start there, if not a little bit lighter. We talked about rotating chest and shoulders, like leading off with chest and doing shoulders. You can also rotate set volume. So you could have a chest-focused day where you're doing 3 sets for chest exercises and 2 for shoulders, and then you alternate. You do 3 for shoulders and 2 for chest. Or you can start with 3, and or you could do 3-3 on the first 2 and 2-2 on the 2 sets on the next 2 exercises. Many ways to slice and dice it. Just always know that you are better off working hard than working with volume. As a baseline, working hard should be the baseline, and then add or remove volume from there.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. It's a good summary.
As far as pros, Faz, it's pretty inherent in the type of programming. I would say that of all the 4 that we're going to look at, I would say the push-pull legs has a potential to be the most demanding in a good way, just because a lot of younger guys, when I was younger, I could train more frequently. I like to train 5 days a week. And there's a big crowd out there right now, the 3-4 days a week max. And, for the average lifter, I understand it. The average over 35 lifter with a job and a family, yeah, that's fair. That's very fair. But for the young kid full of testosterone, and that's basically a garbage dump they can eat all day and not gain weight, it has a lot of potential to put on a lot of mass.
And one more plus, it's fun, because you've got all that. You've got the pump in that one area. So on the chest, on the push day, your chest, your triceps, your shoulders are all pumped up. On a back day, your back and biceps are all pumped up. Like, it's good for the pump. And you know what? I'll say one more positive, sorry, before we move on. For me, it's also quite good for my joints and injuries as well, because once I'm warmed up, once I've started with the press exercise and my chest, shoulders, and triceps are all warmed up, then I don't need to re-warm everything up. So I'm not going to a completely different area. Like if I was doing an upper routine, so I don't have to go from chest to back. I'm already warm. The blood's already in the area. So in that sense, it's actually a relatively safe split as well.
So, Faz, this is going to be a pretty long series. We're going to move on to upper lower right now. And guys, check out part 2, link down below. So, upper lower, Faz, this is probably, outside of the push-pull legs, this is probably a program I give to my clients the most. It's a good balance of, not beating the crap out of a single body part. Here's the thing, and I want to lead this off saying this properly. I love body part training. I've always done body part training. I've messed around with other things. It's my favorite. But a body part split pretty much requires you to train 4 days a week hard. You can squeeze it down into 3 days if you want, but then you're decreasing overall weekly volume, and that's another topic. But with the body part split, it commands almost that you work 4 days a week. For the average lifter, I like the upper lower because it can be worked 3 or 4 days a week. Again, I mentioned flex schedule earlier. I have a little bit different way that I program my upper lowers fast. So I'm going to lead off with that and then let you jump in the pool. I don't like conventional upper lowers. I think they're horrible. I think the way a lot of people run upper lowers is chest, shoulders, back, arms. That's a lot of work in one day. Forget that. I'm not about that life at all. And then the average lifter who doesn't really like training legs all that much anyway has to do 2 leg days a week. No, a hard pass. So the way I like to do things is, and you can tear this apart. I like to do push, chest, shoulders, and arms. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'll do chest, shoulders, and arms. And then my lower, I have upper and posterior days, which I call posterior. They are squats, legs, deadlift days, and back. So legs and back, basically.
Okay.
The only caveat is you do not train after upper days. You have to take a day off before deadlift days. Okay. Or before posterior days, so your biceps are headed into that workout fresh. So you can do 2 on, 1 off. It just has to be posterior, upper, off, posterior, upper, off, and that can still get you over 4 workouts a week. So that's my spiel, Faz. What are your thoughts on the upper lowers?
So I think just to question you on that a little bit. It seems that would leave for a relatively easy upper day, push day, and a very loaded posterior day. Do you find that to be the case, or am I misreading it?
In the day and age of pandemics and a lot of home gyms, the leg workouts aren't as intense as one would suspect. So when you do a gym workout, you kind of have to temper things. I do rotations. I don't just do one exercise or one round A-B. It's multiple workouts per body part. So If I do squats, then I'll jump into a row exercise. And then usually I'll come back to a hamstring exercise like a leg curl. And then maybe you move back to a back exercise like a seated cable row. So you really only have two big hitters out of the gate. And when it comes to any type of programming, usually I lead with the left-right, combination, and then you kind of move down the chain as far as intensity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I suppose with that way, you don't get the same overlap as if you separate them out. So you don't, because quite a lot of back work is replicated with lower body work. So I suppose you don't get that problem. So that's your way of doing things would it would make sure you don't get that problem, because you'd have overlegs. Let's say you did rows on upper body day and then deadlifts on lower body day. With your way of doing things, you wouldn't have that problem because you actually do them on the same day. So that makes sense. So yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, the only hard thing is when you get into somebody that wants to train legs seriously, and they are open to leg presses, hack squats, a wide variety of really intense leg exercises. Then you really have to, that same person is going to be very intense about their back work as well. They're going to want the dumbbell rows and the barbell rows and the seated cable rows and the pull-ups. And you got a lot of work to fit in. So the question becomes, how do you fit that in? And, we can split hairs about how to slice it and dice it. But if you try to fit in all that intense back work in with chest and shoulders, I just find it can be very clunky.
That makes sense. You know what? I'll tell you a nuance that I use. I'll tell you guys at home as well. So 2017 and 2018, I did upper lower, and I've got my own little wrinkle on the upper lower as well. So coming from a powerlifting background, I found that my chest and back were very dominant, as were my legs, but I had 0 biceps and 0 side delts. So what I did was I actually put together an upper lower for those 2 years where I was doing side delts and biceps on all 4 days. So I would do an upper, which was the normal, chest, back, shoulders, arms, and then lower, which was quads, hams, glutes, calves. But I would do additional side delt and bicep day on the lower days because I found that those areas recovered tremendously fast. And I think most people would agree, side delts recover very, very fast. Biceps, maybe not so much, but you've got to bear in mind those are weak areas for me. So they did recover very fast. And so I did that for an entire year, and it was almost like a specialization cycle that year. And I did bring up my side delts and biceps quite a lot. So that's my little wrinkle to the upper lower split. So before we move on to the pros and cons.
And just in discussing this, sometimes when you work these things out, you come up with some new conclusions or some new thoughts. And just having the discussion we're having right now, it just struck me that the upper lower might be the hardest to naturally program. And just because the push-pull legs, we talked about some of the things you have to think about in programming. But with the upper lower, it's really easy to create a bad workout, an unbalanced workout. I mean, you have to. The posterior days with legs and back in my world are not easy workouts. But, on the other hand, if I have to do chest, shoulders, back, and arms on one day, that's not an easy workout to get in enough weekly volume. You pretty much have to work out 4 days a week. So what are the cons, Faz, other than they can be challenging to program no matter how you program them?
Okay, so I wrote down a couple of pros and cons issues. One, I think what we're sacrificing is the pros for the upper lower is that whatever you hit, you can hit it fresher than if you were doing, say, a push-pull legs, right? So right. If you're doing, say, chest and back and then whatever else or arms, you're likely doing less for each particular area. Whereas in a push-pull legs routine, your push day, you're just pumped full. And you just continue that pump throughout the course of the day. Whereas for the upper and for a lower, you can move things around. You can do a quad and then a hamstring exercise and end with a calf exercise. And so you're fresher per exercise. And that usually leads to better strength development because you're able to come at each exercise in the routine fresher and more able to put out maximum force. If you remember what we said at the end of the push-pull legs discussion, That is that by the end of the day, you might get too fatigued to really put in a good effort. You're not going to get to that point with an upper lower because you're always going to be relatively unpumped and fresh. So the pros are you have the freshness. The negatives are with that, you're having to warm up again quite a lot. I found with the upper lower, it was far more stressful on my joints. I had more shoulder issues on the upper lower than I did on pretty much any routine that I did. Probably more so than the push-pull legs as well. The push-pull legs had a weird amount of elbow issues with me. So yeah, I found those are kind of the positives. You're approaching everything fresh, but by the same token, you're not as pumped. Ergo, you're not as warmed up, and so that's a negative in and of itself. Hopefully, the impression we're giving is that none of these routines are perfect. They all have the individual differences that need to be worked out.
Right, and it's not as simple as this is the best. I mean, with the upper lower or my variation upper posterior, there is going to be more warm-up sets because you're jumping to body part area. You know, if you're doing shoulders and back in the same workout, you're going to have to warm up for rows, whether they're dumbbell rows, barbell rows. On the if you're doing legs and back, you're going to have to warm up. There's going to be a little bit more demands as far as the warm up time. Mm-hmm. And one thing I find is a push pull legs. It's easier to program. Like, okay, on the pull day, I can put in rear delts, I can put in traps, they fit. On the leg day, I can squeeze in calves and abs, and they fit a lot easier. On the upper lower, when I go in and plug everything in, I'm like, okay, now where do I put the rear delt work? Because if I don't put in face pulls, someone's gonna, their mangina is gonna fall off. Because it is 2021 and we can't possibly deal with life if we don't have an excess amount of face pulls. All right. So we have to put, where do we put in the rear delt work, the ab work, the calf work? You start to ask these questions and, you're tacking, you really have to consider because what the needs are of the average individual. I'm not saying it's a pain in the ass, but I'm saying it's easier to slot things in on a push-pull legs. I would argue it's easier to slot things in on a push-pull legs.
Yeah, I would say so. And if you guys have made it so far in the video, I'm going to give you just a bit of a tip and an insight into how I program routines. And I would encourage you guys to do this the same way. I would plug it all in on a spreadsheet and write out the set volume. So write down every body part that you're going to be training during that day, match it to what you're training on the other days of the week, then work out your set volume so that you're not overloading any one area or underloading any other area. I'm actually planning on doing a video about this, how I put together an upper lower, and to talk you through my entire process of how I think about these things from start to finish. So yeah, watch out for that on my channel. But yeah, that's what I would encourage you guys to do, is to write it all out on a spreadsheet, make sure that you're matching the amount of volume to every body part so you're not overloading some areas and underloading others. And that way you've got a nice balanced routine, because you will feel that in the gym. If you make a mistake and all of a sudden you've overloaded your chest with far too many exercises, you will feel that in the gym. You'll be dragging ass and your chest and shoulders might not recover as well. And that's a route to injury.
Yeah, you really have to be aware of any type of programming of balance, because if you don't go into it with a focus on balance, you could walk away with, far more pressing or pulling exercises and pressing or whatever. And there is a pragmatic side to programming where you have to get people out of the gym eventually. So you can continue to stuff things in because we need our face pulls and we need our calf work and we need our ab work and we need our trap work. And of course, in this day and age, if you watch Alpha Destiny, you need your neck work, you need your forearm work. I like Alex. That's just a soft jab. Don't panic. But that's kind of how it is. People will have different areas of specialty that they like to work in. So you just, like Faz says, you either need to have done this for 35 years like me and balance is programmed into your brain, or write it down on a spreadsheet and make sure you have a good starting point. Any pros or cons, Faz, to an upper lower that we didn't discuss? I'm going to say the one potential con is that you can do an upper lower 3 times a week. I use a flex schedule, so you can do upper, lower, lower, upper, lower, but that leaves the potential to have less weekly volume. So it does open the door to the older individual or the individual time constraints that can't lift 4 times a week. This is a great choice. You just have to kind of be aware that you might be trading off some volume, and therefore you might have to work harder on the sets you're working at.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree with that. And I'd say probably as a final sort of negative, for me, it's not quite as much fun as doing either a push-pull legs or a bro split, just because of the pump. You're not getting as much of a pump in any one localized place, like with push or pull or with a bro split. It's just kind of like a full or half your body pump, and it's not really a very good one. And leg days are just horrendous because it's just your whole lower body all in one go. There's no chance of splitting that up. So it's a pretty brutal day, but I think if you are a novice to intermediate, which is a lot of the people that we deal with, it's probably one of the more effective ways of programming alongside the push-pull legs.
Yeah, I would say it's a program. It's a training style that can make a lot of sense when done right, but it is a training style that, for the average individual, if you're put on an upper lower or an upper posterior, and you're given a progression approach, and you're stepping into a world that you haven't done previously, you're not getting the results you want. All of a sudden, you're on a good upper lower. It can be very demanding. Not as demanding as a full body done properly, but it can be pretty demanding. That's it, guys. This is part 1. Part 2 linked down below. Sorry this video series is taking so long, but we wanted to dive into things. And Faz, we're going to head out. I appreciate you joining me. For those of you new to the channel, please subscribe, and we're out of here. Check out the link down below.